Let me tell you a little bit about myself. My parents were born at L&M Hospital. I was born at L&M Hospital. My children were born at L&M Hospital. So I guess I've always pretty much been from the area. I live in Waterford now. The guy in the blue jacket in the back is my husband. Never planned on ever writing a book. I am not a writer. I'm not even a reader. I'm a listener. What I mean by that is a lot of the books that I've listened to probably 500 in the last couple of years, but I listen to them in the car because I'm in the car a lot, through audiobook type things. And the reason I wrote the book was so many people told me I should, starting with him. You really ought to write a book. You have very unique, interesting background, and you really ought to write a book. So that's kind of how it all started.
Well, my name is Bruce McDonald. I'm the Director of Communications for the Eastern Connecticut Chamber of Commerce. I have a long background in the area as well. I wasn't born in L&M, but I've worked in a number of media outlets in Connecticut, The Day, The Bulletin, a couple of radio stations, and worked for newspapers elsewhere. And at some point a few years ago, I crossed the Rubicon, as it were, and went from writing and journalism to public relations. And with that, if you'd like me to ask you some questions, I'd be
Go right ahead.
to. Okay. Well, why don't we start with the obvious, the title. That seems to embody just about your life, your striving to be successful. Tell me about the title. How'd you get it, or what made you title the book that way?
Good question. After being in business for over 25 years and selling the business, I decided to set up another business about 3 days later, and the second business is called, above all else, Success in Life and Business. So when I decided to write the book, I thought, gee, it would be great to kind of tie it all together and have the name of the book be the name as the business. So it's the same as the website, it's the same as the business, it's the same as the book.
Well, as you know, consistency in marketing is a good thing.
Right.
Tell us, was there, I heard you mention before, and you do mention it in the book as well, that you are not a traditional reader, but then again, you don't sound like a traditional success story. But was there one thing that made you decide to write the book?
Everybody pestered me enough that I finally did it. And I think that's it. The reason I set up the second business is probably similar to the reason I wrote the book, is after all I've been through in the life that I've had, it was just a real good way to pass some of that knowledge and information on to help other people, rather than dying with it all inside me. And that was really the main reason.
Okay, well, that's a good reason, as they say. You mentioned in fact, chapter 11, that people should, I think, avoid putting themselves on financial and personal autopilot. For those who haven't read the book, what did you mean by that?
Not avoid, but to put themselves.
To put themselves on. Okay.
Right.
You're right.
Okay, what I mean by that is, as we get older, change becomes more and more difficult. Mm-hmm. I had about 1,200 clients when I sold my practice, and over half of them were over the age of 60, and I was in business for more than 25 years. Mm-hmm. So I worked with people from when they were young, through putting their children through college, through aging, through death, through settling estates, and through the whole process. Mm-hmm. I've also been looking after my 88-year-old mother for the last 10 years, and I've seen others through death in the family and have handled all of that. Mm-hmm. So many years ago, while I was still running my other business, I put together a program where I went around teaching people all the things you can do while your mind is sharp to get all your ducks in a row so that you can maintain your independence as long as possible, financially and also with your surroundings. Sure. To the point that after I sold the business, my husband and I sold the house that we loved. We actually designed it and built it the year we got married. It's the best house either of us have ever had. We both loved it, but we sold it. Mm-hmm. Built another one down the street because we practice what I preach. Mm-hmm. In that we set it up so that we could live there for the rest of our life. And we couldn't have done that in the other house.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that about the different levels and so forth, which are important, and they're right. Details. Are you a detail-oriented person?
Oh, yes. Detail, look at him.
There's a story behind that.
Detailed, organized. I don't like clutter. Yeah, detailed, organized for sure. I think I was a planner out of the womb.
Is that a good thing, or should you sometimes let things fly and wing them?
Well, it's funny you say that because things don't bother me. My average blood pressure, believe it or not, is like 97/60. Wow. It's just normally very low. Things don't bother me. Mm-hmm. So it's not that. No. It's just if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right, or I'm not going to do it at all. Certain
amount of sense to that. Mm-hmm. It's a good sense, in fact. You mentioned in the book also that in a fairly short order, you had to pass a series of what sounded like complicated tests to get into this financial field. Maybe you could tell us about that and the kind of gumption, I guess, it took to buckle down in a short amount of time and pass all of those tests. What was that like?
Well, one of the things you'll find in the book, there's quotes after every chapter. And then at the end of the book, I sum up all the quotes. Here are quotes to live life by, here's quotes to run a business by, and here are quotes how to balance the two. Mm-hmm. So to give a little background before I answer that question so it'll make more sense, while in the process of a divorce, I sold my house, took my kids, moved 70 miles away and started my own business. I had no alimony, no child support, and no other source of income. I knew absolutely no one because I had just moved to the area. Believe it or not, I decided to set up an asset management and financial planning practice. I had never owned a CD in my life. I didn't know what a mutual fund or a stock was, but I figured even if the business didn't work out, what I would learn would be worth it for me because I would learn how to be able to manage finances, to be able to manage my children and our finances correctly. And here I am 31 years later, and it worked out really well. So what he was talking about with the exams, in the middle of the divorce, while I was moving, while I was trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, while I was trying to get my kids settled, in order to be a financial analyst or a financial advisor and financial management person, you have to pass a series of federal and state exams. So I studied all of that in the middle of the divorce, when my mind was not the best place that it had ever been, for sure. So, but learning all of that was really very important because how can you do your job if you don't know all the basics about it? And it really taught me a lot, so it was great. And I passed them all first time out.
Very good, congratulations.
I told you, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right, or I'm not going to do it at all. Except maybe the marriage. That one I didn't get right, I guess.
Well, you got it right the second time.
I certainly did.
Okay. And that's another interesting aspect of, I mean, some books will, by people who've had success in business, will focus just on that to the exclusion of a personal life. And yet, you mix the two together in a lot of different settings. Was that unusual, or would you see it as the only way to approach your life story, which is obviously integrated?
I had two daughters, and I felt it was really important for them to see what a woman could do. Okay. That if I didn't have those children, you probably remember reading the part, I probably wouldn't be here now. Right. I had planned that I would not be here, and that was all set. But then I got the kids, and I figured I didn't have the right to the luxury of ending my life when I had two children that I was responsible for. So because I had the children, it gave me the incentive. It gave me the reason to make sure that I built a successful business that was ethical, that had a great reputation because my children were going to live in the area and they had to be proud of who I was and who they were living with. And I needed them to see that you can do pretty much anything you want in life. You just have to want it bad enough.
That's a very good point. Tell us about the business, though. What exactly, I know it's the financial field and financial analyst, but to financial illiterates like me, what does that mean? What did you do for people and to help people?
Okay. It started with helping people figure out what they have now, what their goals are. If there's goals they should have that they're not aware of, I help them with that. And then they received a written plan from me, which was basically a roadmap on what they needed to do different than what they're doing now to do the best they can with what they have to work with. At the time I sold my practice, I was managing about $200 million of other people's money. So I would show them how to invest it, I would invest it for them, and I would manage it for them.
So you took people through a very complicated process and a very bewildering one to many of us, and put them on a path, hopefully, for long-term financial solvency.
It used to be really easy. This is what I would always tell clients. It used to be pretty easy years ago when all there was a bank account, CD, that type of thing. But with all that's out there now, I mean, I handled over 1,000 different types of investment products. And it's gotten so complex that most people don't have the time, energy, desire, or knowledge to deal with it all. And so I would help them pull it all together and make sure they were doing the best they can with what they had to work with.
Certainly makes sense, because it is confusing. I know that.
And I taught me how to do it.
That's even better.
And actually, my husband was a client before he was my husband. I taught him how to do it. And I got him to retire when he was 55. And I was still working.
Ooh, nice way. You also talk in what appears to be a very highly personal way about navigating the potentially treacherous waters of a divorce, and the importance of maintaining, to the extent that you can, civility and a certain level of agreeability, if you will, for the kids. Could you talk about that? I mean, that must have been very difficult.
It was. And to give you even a sideline about that, I am currently one of the few certified divorce financial analysts in the state of Connecticut. I have testified in court as an expert witness on what's financially fair in divorce. And I went through all of that and got that designation long after my divorce, and I wish I had one of those when I went through it. The way I look at it is, stuff is stuff. I mean, the sofa, the TV, the furniture, that seems to be what so many people fight about when they're in the middle of a divorce. And the way I always looked at it, even in the middle of my divorce, someday that sofa's going to have to be replaced, the TV's going to break down and be gone, but he's always going to be their father. That's not going to change. I can be 80, 90 years old, he's still always going to be their father. And is it really worth the fight and argument over a television or a sofa or something specific like that that's going to be gone at some point anyway? Or is keeping the relationship so that the children can have a good life, which is more important? And I would have left with nothing. Fortunately, I didn't have to, but I would have left with nothing if it meant keeping that intact.
Would you, I mean, things change over the years. Would you have advice for other young women in similar situations, aside from what you just imparted? Are there things that they could do to help them, their kids, and so forth?
During the divorce or after the divorce?
Well, both, really. I mean.
Okay, so during the divorce, when I coach people in the process of the divorce, quite often what you find is one person is much more knowledgeable about the financial aspects of the household than the other person is. Typically we think it's the guy, but that's not always the case anymore. Sometimes it's the woman. And so the most important thing is that both parties need to have a full understanding of what's there. They don't have to go to school and learn about it all, but they need to have copies of everything. So what I would tell people when I was coaching them would be, especially like right now is perfect timing when all the income tax comes in. Right. Copy every single statement, stick it away in an envelope somewhere, out of the house. Make sure you know what's there for debt, for assets, old tax returns, pension statements, everything you can. Even if you don't even know what you're looking at, it doesn't matter. I'd rather you had too much than not enough, and just start making copies of everything and keeping record of it. I've had attorneys hire me to do forensics in divorce cases, where they say, can you please take this case for me and look back at the last 10 years and see if this guy or this woman was sticking money away somewhere. And so they pay me to even try to figure that out. And if you research it back far enough, it's not that hard to do. Some people think it is, but it's really not that hard. Especially in this technology age, you can find out almost anything you want on almost anyone.
Very true. You mentioned earlier, shifting topics somewhat, about building a highly successful business from scratch, and then at a point of your choosing in life, deciding to sell it, and you walk through that process. Well, how do you build a business from scratch into one that's so large? I mean, is there any trick or a secret?
One of the first things I learned was getting in front of one client at a time would not build my business quick enough. Again, I had no other income, and I had $4,000 to my name when we divorced. And I had to set up an office, I had to buy business cards, letterhead, pay for my licenses, pay for my education, so that left me very, very little. And if I could only sit in front of one person here and one person there, it wasn't going to bring in enough money to put food on the table. So I got very good at media relations and marketing very quickly, to the point that instead of in 31 years, I've never asked for a referral from a client, which is what all businesses teach you to do. I felt the attorneys don't, the CPAs don't, the doctors don't, I don't either. But instead, I would ask for a referral to be a speaker. So if you belong to a club or an organization or a church group, religious group of some type, I would rather be in front of 30 people, helping them to know what they need to do to get their financial ducks in a row, and then if they want advice from me afterwards, I just saw 30 people instead of spending an hour sitting in front of one. So I got in front of a lot of people quickly. It's funny, my kids used to joke around about it. And I guess it was joking around. At first I think it bothered them, but then they got used to it. They'd say, you can go anywhere and everybody knows who you are. I mean, we would be in the airport in Florida and people would walk up and, aren't you Nancy Seeley Butler? Weren't you such and such? And the kids would say, how do you know that? Well, I got so good at media relations, either my picture or an article or something was either in the paper, on the television, or on the radio at least once a month for 25 years. So even if the client didn't need me now because they had no need, maybe 3 years from now, there is a rule in financial planning. I don't know if you've heard this before, but in every 3-year cycle, you will have a major financial event in your life of some type. Whether it be a huge raise, a promotion, a divorce, a marriage, someone starting college, you just paid your last mortgage payment, you won the lottery. There's going to be some type of huge financial event every 3 years. And so my philosophy was, I just wanted to be in the public eye enough that when that event happened, I would be the one they'd be thinking of. So they might not need me now, but after seeing me often enough, I'd be the one they'd think of when they needed someone.
Which is a tried and true principle of marketing, as you know. You get familiar, and when people have a need, you're the first one they think of. There's a theme to my way of reading it that runs through the book. You detail different aspects of your professional and personal life, and you mentioned this somewhere in there about adversity and how it has shaped your life. Maybe you could speak about that. What role did it play?
I am a firm believer that we do not get to pick the emotions that come over us. So if something happens and it makes you sad, if something happens it makes you happy, you don't get to pick how it makes you feel, but what you do get to pick is what you do with those feelings and how do you take it to the next level. And what I mean by that is you could line up a couple of people in a row and they could have exactly the same problem in their life, and one person will thrive because of it and the other person will collapse because of it. So it's all a matter of how do you take what you've gone through, pull whatever you can out of it to have it help you get to the next level. And that's how I've always looked at everything. I've had, when you read the book, there's been a lot of really difficult things, but it doesn't matter. I've gotten to a point in life where I can't imagine something that could happen that I wouldn't be able to handle it. I mean, cut off my arm, I have another one. Anything. I can't think of anything that couldn't happen that I wouldn't find a way to take care of it.
So adversity in and of itself is not bad, it's how you react to it. Is that what you're saying?
And actually it helps you grow. Because if your life was too easy, you wouldn't have the life you have now. We are who we are because of everything that's happened in our lives. And it's up to us to take those experiences and make them a positive. So even though there's a lot of issues that I've had that are in the book, I've turned them all around to how do you take that and bring it to the next level so you have a good life.
Well, you speak in the book, and I think you said it in the introduction here, about a strong desire to learn. Was that an element in your success, or was it something else? It's kind of an intangible.
The first element of my success was the fact that I had 2 children that were reliant on me. I could not fail. I had no choice. If I failed, where would they be? Yeah. So that gave me absolutely no choice. Secondly, I have an awful lot of energy. People tell me that all the time. Where the heck do you get all your energy from? And I get bored easy. So if I'm not always moving, always learning, always growing, here's a perfect example, and I don't even think this is in the book. I can go on vacation and absolutely love the place. Best place I've ever been, I will never go there again. Because I will not go to the same place twice. It's a big world, there's a whole lot I want to see, and if I keep going to the same place over and over and over again, I think of all the things over here that I'm missing, to the point that in 2 weeks I'll be in South Africa. So I mean, I just like to go, I like to see, I like to do. And
travel can be intellectually rewarding as well as emotionally stimulating too.
Exposure is important.
Well, it's very. Now, you married young, very young, according to what I read in the book. How did that play out in your later life? I mean, would you recommend people get married that young?
No, not at that age.
Okay.
And if my kids did it, I would have killed them, so no. And now my granddaughter's older than I was at that age, so she better not do that either. Well, she can't, because I would have already been married by her age. But anyway, I eloped when I was 15. I had my first child when I was 16. And I was married for over 15 years. And it was great until it wasn't great. Would I recommend that? No. What happened? What happened was we grew in opposite directions because we weren't fully matured at that point. We weren't who we were going to be at that point. And we grew in completely opposite directions. So actually splitting everything up in the house was easy because everything I loved he hated and everything he loved I hated. So it was, yeah, good, you take that, I'll take this, I don't like it anyway. So I mean, that part of it worked out really well. But I've just always been very independent. I mean, got married, got out of the marriage the same way I got in the marriage. Didn't tell anyone, not even our kids, until months after the divorce was already final. My mother lived out of state, called her up to stay with us for the weekend, came on Friday, on Sunday when she was ready to leave, said, guess what? We haven't been married for 6 months. And that's how she found out that we were out of the marriage, similar to the way she found out we were in the marriage.
You told them afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want all the hassle of, well, you should get this, and you should do that, and you should. Didn't need it, didn't want it, didn't need it. I'll take care of this. When it's all done, then they'll find out.
Well, in your role as an expert witness, which you do mention in the book, what do you find in those proceedings to be major stumbling blocks to an amicable dissolution of the marriage? Is there one thing, or two, or three, or?
One of the biggest issues I find, and the attorneys now agree because I have specific software that shows where a couple will be, where they both will be the day of the divorce, but also if they take that split and take that income, where will they be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now? And the reason why that's so important is lots of times you think it's a 50-50 split, and it looks like it's a 50-50 split, but it's not. So here's an extreme example just to drive the point home. One person got a $500,000 house, one person got a $500,000 401k plan. You think they both have $500,000? No, 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 no. When they sell the $500,000 house, depending on the way the taxes are at that time, they may not have to pay any tax on it if it was a primary residence or they're buying another house in place of it. When they take the money out of the 401k, they may lose up to 40% of it just in federal and state income taxes. So did they really get $500,000? No. So the other thing I see is the types of investments people take. I had one couple where the husband said, well, you take all the limited partnerships and I'll take all the mutual funds. In fact, I'm so nice to you, I'll give you an extra $50,000 in limited partnerships, more than the mutual funds are worth. Well, what the spouse didn't know is the limited partnerships are 20-year terms. You cannot cash them in. There was no way to sell them, no way to cash them in. You had to hold them to term. And in the meantime, the other person got less money, but he had usable money that he could do things with. And so it's a matter of knowing what you're getting, and it's not just the dollars that matter.
So again, knowledge is power.
That's for sure.
All right. Well, I've got a couple more questions. When people finish reading the book, what do you want them to walk away with?
I want them to walk away with a smile on their face. I want them to walk away feeling really great and knowing that whatever way your life is now, you can vision what it'll be like 1 year, 3 years, 5 years from now, and what you're going to do with it over the next whatever period, because your life can be pretty much whatever you want it to be. You're the one that gets to pick.
When going forward, what do you envision for yourself? You're a planner by admission, self-admission.
Oh, yes.
And you do talk about travel, and you just mentioned that here again. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Well, it's funny you ask that, because my kids say to me, you sold the business 6 years ago. I thought you were going to retire. Why are you doing all this stuff? And I said, well, tell me something. If I don't do any of this stuff, what do you want me to do when I wake up tomorrow? I mean, what is it I'm supposed to be doing? Here's my definition of retirement, and it's what I told all my clients, and what I would tell everybody, and it's how I live by it also. Retirement doesn't necessarily mean you'll never work again. Retirement means that you have your assets and income set up properly, that it's throwing off enough to support you. If you are working, it's because you enjoy what you're doing, and you can walk off the job at any time because you have enough money coming in without the job. I have that. I've had that since I sold my business. Do I have to do any of this? No. What am I going to do if I don't do this? This is just, to me, it's just life. I'm not ready to turn over and die yet. I will continue to travel. I will continue to educate people, help people. I'm a business coach. I now coach top financial planning practices all across the country. I coach real estate businesses and other businesses. And the bottom line is just to help people do a better job for their clients ethically, while improving their own bottom line. So that's on the business side. On the personal side, I speak publicly all the time, even to, I've gone into battered women's centers and gotten them back on their feet financially, educating them that way. I've gone into young youth groups and talked to them about my story and where I came from. Because think about it, if I eloped at 15, I didn't graduate high school. I left, and look at where I am now. So I went back afterwards, I got a GED, I put myself through college before I had to put my own kids through college, because I knew their father wouldn't pay a dime, because he wasn't paying a dime. And so it's just a matter of taking control of your own life. So for me, what's next? I'm here. I'm doing what I want, when I want. Like I said, in a week, my youngest daughter will be 40 on March 3rd, and she and her mother will be on an African safari on her 40th birthday. My husband didn't want to go, so she's going.
That sounds like fun. I wish you much success in the future.
Thank you.
Whatever future it turns out to be, and thank you for sharing your life story with us.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. My pleasure.
Thanks.
Yeah.
What I tried to do when I wrote the book, because so many people told me I should write about my life, as I'm writing it, I'm thinking, okay, my family and my friends care about my life. Who else is going to care what the heck happened in my life? So what I tried to do is break the book up into chapters about different events that happened, what I got out of them, and how I took it to the next level. So so what I'm going to do now is read like little parts out of different parts of the book to kind of give you the sense of that. So the first is on my life's work. Above all else, success in business. I was 31 years old, and I didn't have a clue about who I was or what I was capable of. I didn't know what food I liked to eat, what clothes I liked to wear, what hairstyle looked best on me, or what kind of movies I liked. Since my marriage at age 15, I let someone else influence those decisions for me. I was happy, or at least I thought I was happy. I had no sense of what I was worth and didn't realize I was missing something fundamental. Looking back at who I was then, I realized that in many ways, knowing who I was and what I liked wasn't of great importance to me. But it matters to me now. As I moved forward, it was important for my children to learn from my example that success is possible even during difficulty. That's kind of how it all started. Newly single, new career. So this was after the divorce when I decided I needed to find something else to do. Divorce became my reality. I wanted to move back home, so my ex-husband and I agreed that I would find a different job closer to where I would be living with my children. The reason why I said a different job, my husband and I were working for the same company when we were in the middle of divorce. One of us needed to not work for that company. I had been managing apartments for 12 years, but I didn't know if I still wanted to do that or if it would pay enough to allow me to support my children. I didn't know what I was qualified for or capable of doing, and even if I knew, I wasn't sure how to find the right employer. I needed to coordinate when the divorce would be final, when my current job would end, what my new career would be, where my new career would be located, when my new career would begin, when to move, and get the kids settled into a new neighborhood and school. That was a huge weight on my shoulders and difficult to manage, both emotionally and financially. I was going to be on my own for the first time in my life. I would have no alimony and very little child support, which stopped a short time after it began. When I say very little, it was $30 a week. I never had to support myself before, let alone myself and 2 children. I was only 31 years old and needed to be sure I chose a career that provided the opportunity for me to grow in many ways. I needed to be there for my children, I needed our income to grow, I needed to be mentally challenged, I needed to believe I was making a difference in the world, and I needed to be sure I could do it. And so came the dilemma. Do I take the sure pay at an amount that I had never even thought was possible, but there was no chance for growth? They would be hiring me at the top of the ladder with no other place to go. Or do I take the commission-only job with growth potential, but in an area I know nothing about, don't even know if I can do the job? Even though the money was a sure thing and the position would be much easier and safer, I decided that at the age of 31, I was not willing to put myself in a position that could cause me to be stagnated for the rest of my life. I also decided that even if the job did not work out, what I would learn about investments, insurance, and financial planning would help me to handle my finances in a way that would enable me to build a good life for my children and me. I would then just chalk it up to the cost of my education if it didn't work out. And so I began the grueling task of studying to pass several federal and state exams. I also needed to work on finding a place for us to live, finalizing the divorce, and determining which items in the home I could take with us, as well as figuring out what we would need at our new home. Then I would need to find the money to buy it. The divorce made me feel like a total failure, so every time I passed an exam, it gave me hope that I could make a better future for us. I don't know how I did it, but I passed all the exams the first time around. It made me realize that when you put your mind to it, you can accomplish almost anything. I believe most people spend more of their waking hours at work than with their family, friends, or anywhere else. And life is too short to not only enjoy what you do, to not enjoy what you do. I would rather see you make less money but be happy than to make a lot of money and be miserable. Ethics and truly caring about the client is always number one. I always believed if you do the right thing, the money will come. And at the end of my life, when I am looking back, I need to feel really good about the life I have lived and the person I have become. Growing up early. As a young teen, I felt insecure, as a lot of teens do. However, because I developed physically at an early age, I always looked older than I really was, and it proved to be an even greater problem for me. Clothes that most 12-year-olds would wear didn't fit me. I needed to wear clothes that fit my body, which further contributed to me looking older than my real age. Looking older meant that people thought I was older. Adults who didn't know me expected more of me, and boys who were a lot older than me started paying attention to me, thinking that I was their age. I needed to grow up emotionally a lot quicker so that my mental and emotional presence better matched my physical appearance. So I did. Because I was treated older, I started acting older. White lipstick and big hair. I don't know if you remember those days. Have you ever had a bad hair day? Have you ever ironed your hair with a flat iron and not burned it? Have you ever slept through the night in large wire rollers with brushes inside to hold the rollers in place to the point that you had indents in your face 4 hours after going to school? Have you ever sprayed your hair so much that it felt like plastic and wouldn't move no matter how hard the wind was blowing? What about wearing white lipstick? Was that a favorite of yours? All of the above and more applied to me. After all, it was the style back then. I believed I would look out of place without it. There are pictures in here. There's a picture in here of me with big hair and white lipstick. The strange case of the missing car. I have an older sister and a younger brother, and boy, did we have some things go on at home. And this is just one that I wanted you to hear. Strange case of the missing car. When we were young, my sister was more daring than me, and at times she brought me in to be her partner in crime. One summer, she wanted to go out with her boyfriend, but our parents did not approve of him. The question was, how could she do it without them knowing? She decided she would wait until everyone was asleep and sneak out to spend the night with him in the middle of the night. But he didn't live nearby, so she needed to come up with a way to get to him and then get back home and be back in bed before our father got up to go to work at 5 in the morning. She decided she would borrow my mother's car, but needed to figure out how to do it without anyone hearing her start it up in the driveway and later put it back where she found it. Our home was set pretty far back from the road, so she released the brake and let the car coast to the bottom of the driveway before she started the engine. And away she went for the night. She had a problem, though, with getting the car back up the driveway with the engine not running when she came back home. The driveway was a little steep and she couldn't push it up the hill herself. That's where I came in. So she woke me up at 4 a.m. to help her push the car back up the driveway. We did this night after night after night until I got tired of being woken up in the early hours of the morning to get out of bed and help her push the car back up the driveway. So the next time she woke me up, I refused to help her. She had to figure out what she would do on her own before Dad got up to go to work. Since she wasn't strong enough to push the car back up the driveway herself, it became apparent that she would have to leave the car at the foot of the driveway. She realized that if she left it just past the row of trees next to the driveway, it would not be seen from the house. So that is what she did. She didn't want to leave the keys in the car, so she decided to place them on top of our father's car, which remained at the top of the driveway next to the house. That way nobody would steal the car. They didn't have the keys, but they'd be on top of the car next to the house. Surprise, surprise! Dad went out the door to go to work, and Mom's car was gone. Needless to say, he and my mother were very upset that their car had been stolen. Dad called the police, and they came right away. When the police drove to the house, they noticed a car with a very similar description to the one reported missing just around the corner at the bottom of the driveway. While my father was outside with them talking about the missing car, he saw a set of keys on the top of his car. He knew they weren't his keys because he had his keys in his pocket. What on earth was going on? Why would someone steal the car, leave it at the bottom of the driveway, then go all the way back up the driveway and leave the keys on top of the car? That was a mystery he would never solve. It wasn't until many years later when my sister, then an adult and on her own, figured out if she told our mother what had really happened back then, there would be nothing she could do about it. So she finally told her, Our father had died several years earlier. He never did find out what happened to the car. It's now more than 40 years later, and we still laugh about it. My mother actually didn't find out about this until she read this book. And actually, she didn't read this book because she's 88 and she's legally blind. Her aide read her the book. And so, I didn't know that ever happened. A lot of other things in here she found out that she didn't know ever happened either. Okay, another short one. Or a little bit longer. We all run away in our own way. My sister, my brother, and I were no exception. This is how I ran away. My way. I want that tennis sweater. I babysat fairly often at a very young age and really enjoyed taking care of children and earning extra money for myself. Several of the other kids in school had really nice looking tennis sweaters. They were white with a V-neck with navy and maroon cable trim around the neck and cuffs. I wanted one so badly, but they were expensive. So I decided I would save my babysitting money until I had enough to buy my sweater. After many, many long months, I had finally saved what I needed to purchase the sweater. I had been waiting for so long. I told my mother that after school I was going to take the bus downtown to buy the sweater. I don't remember now what the reasons were, but she said I could not go. No matter how much I begged and pleaded, she kept saying no. I was livid. I had worked so hard for this, and I had waited and waited for such a long time. Everyone else had one, and I wanted one too. How could she tell me not to? How could she tell me no? I was so upset. I took the bus downtown anyway and used the money I had saved to take a 90-minute bus ride to Hartford, where my boyfriend lived. I was 15 years old at the time and was sure I knew what I was doing. The bus driver and several of the people in the bus smiled and said hello to me, but it seemed they were looking at me strangely, so I kept to myself. As soon as the bus pulled up in the station in Hartford, I got off. I had never been on a bus like this before and had never been in a bus station. It wasn't the nicest place. It had wooden benches, wooden floors, and kind of a run-down look to it. It definitely was not the most inviting or comfortable place. It was winter and it was cold, both outside and inside. I went directly over to the payphone to call my boyfriend. It was a tiny little booth with little room to move. Fortunately, I had thought ahead and brought plenty of change for the phone, as well as my boyfriend's phone number. I couldn't wait to hear his voice. After 3 rings, he answered, "Hi, Neil, you'll never guess where I am. I'm at the bus station in Hartford. I can't wait to see you. Can you come and get me?" He said, "What are you doing in Hartford?" I explained what my mother had done and that I was upset with her and really needed to see him. "I'm in the middle of dinner. I cannot pick you up right now," he said. "I'll call you back in a few minutes. Wait there for my call." I stayed in the phone booth so no one else would use the phone and keep Neil from being able to reach me. After about 15 minutes, I was excited to hear the phone ring. "Hi, Neil. Can you pick me up now? I can't wait to see you." "I cannot pick you up, and you should not have come," Neil said. "Get back on the bus. Take the next bus back home." I was in tears. How could he do that to me? Didn't he care that I was upset? Didn't he want to see me? I purchased some candy at the station, got right back on the same bus I had just stepped out of, and went back home. The bus driver must have thought I was nuts. I was in Hartford all of about 25 minutes and then took the next bus back to New London. When I got to the New London station, my mother was there waiting to pick me up. Apparently, Neil was not busy having dinner. Instead, as soon as we hung up, he called my mother, told her where I was, and that he was sending me back home. She was so glad that he had done that. I later realized that he really did care about me and my safety and welfare. And stupid me, I just spent all my money on a useless bus trip to Hartford with nothing to show for it and had no money left to buy my sweater. I am now in my 60s, and to this day, I have never had one of those tennis sweaters. I don't know, how much longer do you want me to go?
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Big hair, white lipstick. All right, I won't do all of this, but I'll go through just a little bit more. I'm a firm believer you only go around once, and you shouldn't be afraid to try things and do things. And there's also ways to do things when you don't have a lot of money. So I just want to read one short area about an idea of something that I did that's worked out really well, and I've passed it on to other people, and a lot of people have done the same thing. Projects and gifts. Above all else, success and creativity. There seem to be those who appear to have everything, and it's difficult to find a great gift for them. I've always enjoyed finding special gifts that will mean a lot to people. I have done this with little to no budget and also have taken on much more expensive projects. Here are a few of my ideas. Our memories of you. My mother was one of those people who seemed to have everything. I finally came up with a perfect and inexpensive gift that was so great it brought tears to her eyes. I bought some fancy paper and cut it into 4 by 1 inch strips. I sent 6 of these strips in an envelope to each family member and friend, along with a note explaining what to do. So I sent them all over the country to hundreds of people. They were to write a memory they have of my mother, 1 memory per strip, sign their name, and then return all the strips to me by the stated deadline. I had a gold plate engraved that said, "Our memories of you," for a mahogany box that I had purchased. I then folded up each strip, put them in the box, wrapped it, and gave it to her as a birthday gift. One relative reminded her of nicknames they had years ago. Another talked about a special memory of her at the beach. Everyone did a great job of writing fun, funny, or upbeat memories they had of my mother. I compiled more than 100 responses. She cried with joy at reading each one. Many years later, she still cherishes the box of memories. She proudly displays it for all to see and still looks at it from time to time and has her aide read the notes to her. So what did it cost? Just mailing it to family and friends and say, I mean, she cried. That was just the neatest thing, and it cost almost nothing. There's so much you can do if you just kind of step out of the box and not the everyday things. I'm just going to read a couple of quotes, and then I think we'll wrap up. Words to the wise about retirement. I believe that a roof over our heads, food in our mouths, and clothes on our backs during retirement will not be a problem for most of us. Saving and investing is what will make a difference in the quality of life we will be able to afford in retirement, since that is what we have to give up when there isn't enough income available. So what I've always said to people, odds are you're going to have a roof over your head, you're going to have food in your mouth, you're going to have clothes on your back. The quality of life is based on how you save, how you invest, how you manage your assets, and what you do between now and the time you decide to not work anymore will determine how you'll live for the rest of your life, and you won't get a chance to do it over again. So just really pay attention to how you're doing things. And I think it's all about balance. I've always said there's 3 places your money has to go, not necessarily a third, and a third. First place, pay your bills, you won't be here for long. Second, spend some, because if you save it all till later and you don't live that long, what good was it? Third, save some, because if you don't, how are you ever going to stop working and have enough income to live a good life, and also to pay for the big things that the weekly paychecks won't cover, like my trip to Africa? So I mean, saving up. So it's finding that balance that's usually the hardest, but you can do it. And if you don't do it now, you'll be forced to do it later when you can't work anymore. Retirement is when you have your assets and income working to support you in a lifestyle you can be comfortable in. If you are working, it's only because you enjoy what you do, but you can stop working at any time because you have enough income without the job. Timing is important when it comes to withdrawing income from your investments. And once you start, monitoring your withdrawal is key to ensuring assets will last for the rest of your life. There's a chart in here of 2 people that withdrew exactly the same amount of money. They both started with the same amount of money. They both withdrew it for the same amount of years. One person ended up at age 84 with nothing, and the other one ended up with $1.2 million. All because of the year that they started their withdrawal. So the timing and monitoring it is really important. Last but not least, I have one saying that I really believe, and when I first say this, most people have a hard time with it. I believe the old saying, "Do unto others as you would have others do unto you," is wrong. And here's why. Just because you like it that way doesn't mean everybody else does. The saying should be, do unto others as they want to be done to. Would you really like it if I did everything I liked to you? Or would you rather I did what you like to you? So think about being in other people's shoes. It's not just what we like, it's what everybody else wants and needs. Thank you.
Thank you.